Delighted to have you all in here. For those here in person, delighted you could all make it to see our wonderful centre. And welcome to everybody online who's joining us as well. Delighted to be able to share some of our experiences, I guess, probably over the last 12 months that we've had with organizations and companies around Ireland and their experiences about their AI adoption journey. I'm going to be sharing some, context around some of those engagements we've had with those companies, what we've worked on with them, the types of things companies are considering using AI on, and I guess some of the, practical application adoption learnings that we've picked up along the way. Before I do, I just wanted to quickly, just for those who don't know, just to give a quick mention about the AIM Centre itself. So we are Ireland's National AI Hub for Manufacturing Innovation. Within that, we run a national AI studio. It's not a research lab. It's not a theoretical think tank. It's a working environment where companies come in with real opportunity, operational problems, and we try and help them effectively go from everything from very basic rudimentary understanding of AI through to prototyping AI solutions against their actual data. We've worked across, and we're obviously main focus is manufacturing, but we've been working across a number of industries like plastics, food, engineering, medtech, supply chain, ESG, and reporting. And I guess the pattern is pretty consistent that the technology is rarely the hardest part of that journey, right? The integration and the adoption is really where the rubber meets the road as such. And that's the part where we're trying to bridge between companies' high level understanding of what AI is and the possibilities and how they can actually apply it. So what we're trying to effectively build here is, like a front row seat of how to adopt AI, really how it unfolds within an organization, because that's really the uniqueness of the tooling is commoditized and generic, but how it's being applied is how it needs to be customized. So we're backed by Enterprise Ireland, and we're a dedicated hub for manufacturing. But as I said, we work in other industries as well, and we are a national resource for manufacturers for all of the Northwest and for all of Ireland. So, as I mentioned, we're trying to turn the potential or the idea of AI into practical impact for companies. And our goal is that the National AI Studio will be, a resource and a facility that will help bridge that gap for companies. It'll be somewhere where they can come and physically see and experience AI hands-on. There will be demos. I'll show you a little bit more about what the setup's going to be shortly. There will be demo spaces. We're building a mini assembly line to run some AI in manufacturing context. So it's really about bringing companies in, getting them to see it, to touch it, to play with it, right? Get them to build that capability within their organizations. We're not a training provider per se, but our goal is to teach people how to use AI effectively, right? Not to do the actual work itself, but teach them how to build that capability within their organizations, within their teams, give them the confidence to know how to use it well, how to use it responsibly, how to use it ethically, how to manage all the other things that go around AI, like organizational change and process change, etc. So we are a resource for those companies. We have AI solution engineers hired working directly for us. We have access to data scientists through our partnership with CEDAR, the National AI Research Centre. And we're also part of the Data Sustain Eddy. So we'll be working through the Eddy here in the Northwest as well, providing additional services to companies, right? So, our role really is to try help companies who are stuck in that either getting started phase or don't know how to get started, or frankly, where to start is the first question most companies come to us, is that, somebody on the board or some executive has said, we should be doing AI, and that's kind of all they said, and no real firm direction or no strategy around it. We're helping companies go from that statement to, okay, how can it actually potentially bring value to our business? where could we try it out and get our feet wet with it and experiment a little bit, right? And this is an environment for companies to do that. Um, as I mentioned, we will have a smart assembly line downstairs. This is effectively to allow us to demonstrate how AI is being applied in a manufacturing context using things like vision technology for quality assurance, sensor data for predictive maintenance. But probably the keenest interest is around supply chain and supply chain optimization. So we will be having, a mini assembly line that's connected to other AI systems and other third-party back office systems like ERP systems, etc., to give people an idea to see how robotics, AI, and machine data can be brought together to exploit it using AI to get more value out of it ultimately. Um, this is a sort of a rough idea. We have a very small footprint, but you'll see here on the drawing where our assembly line will be there in the top left. So an opportunity to come in and see some robotics and on the assembly line. And then we'll have a number of other sort of stations where people will come and see AI in practice, either in finance or HR or in whatever particular interest the company has that comes on the site visit. We will tailor the visit to be specifically for their industry or their business with some real world examples. And then they get to go on the floor and effectively try it out for themselves and see the potential. So that's not, we're still waiting for our robotics to be fully commissioned. It's going to be delivered in March, hopefully. So it's a shame. Hopefully we'll have you back maybe later in the year and we can do a physical tour, of the physical studio once it's fully live and operational. So we welcome you back for that. I won't go through the detail on that. There's some of the demonstrator projects I mentioned. One other thing just to note, so the AI Studio forms a big part of the backbone of what we do here, but that is strongly connected to our AI Accelerator program. We ran 2 of these last year. We're CPD accredited as well. It's an 8-week program for companies who are looking to start on their journey of adopting AI. We had over 50 companies through the program last year. So we got really good visibility into the types of use cases that companies are looking at, where AI can help them in the first instance. And those 40 or 50 companies were across, like we had not just manufacturing, we had services companies, HR companies, recruitment companies, finance companies. So it's not specifically dealing with manufacturing, but we do have a lot of, because of the area, obviously, we have a lot of the med tech companies would have come in at that accelerator program as well, big and small. And that program, over the 8 weeks, we work with each company on a particular problem within their organization. And why we work on a problem will become evident when I do the presentation. With their data, their scenario. So we actually build a demonstrator with them over the 10 weeks, or 8 weeks, I should say, which shows them, I guess, as really their first experiment in terms of could AI realistically help them in their situation, in this particular process, this particular product, or this particular manufacturing process. And then in parallel with that, we run through every aspect of integrating AI into your business, from understanding the concepts to how do you develop an AI policy in your organization, what's acceptable, what guardrails do you put in place, how do you get buy-in from people, what organizational change is required. There's a lot really that goes on around that's not technical, that a lot of organizations are really sort of trying to get their head around. Even things like the EU AI Act, does that apply to me? If so, what do I need to do? How do I become compliant, etc. So there's a lot of information around the deployment of AI that companies really need to be thinking about, because this is by far the furthest thing from a technical deployment that you possibly could have, right? In terms of the output from it, particularly if it's generative. So the human aspect is critical, that you have human oversight, but also to ensure that it's successful in the organization, you need to get the buy-in from the management and from the users at the end of the day. So the accelerator program is effectively getting yourself organizational ready for integrating AI into your business. Um, there's just a little bit about this. So it's runs for 8 weeks. We're running another one starting first one in 2026 will be starting probably the middle or the end of March. You can find more information about it or register your interest if you know other companies who are looking to start their AI journey and don't really know where to begin. Please feel free to direct them to the AIM website, and we'd love to talk to them about potentially joining us at the end of March. As I mentioned, we have a partnership with CEDAR, which gives us access to some data scientists, and we're also one of the members of the consortium for the AI antenna project. So probably was it October or November, Ireland won the bid to develop an AI antenna, which is effectively the smaller version of the precursor to an AI factory. There are a number of them around Europe. We'll be partnering with France and Belgium in the first instance until we grow big enough to develop our own AI factory. But ultimately, that will give us access to infrastructure and sandboxes and other support services for companies when they want to scale their AI solution. Because one of the biggest challenges we're seeing is people getting started with AI, getting some maybe good POCs going, and then getting stuck, right? So there's what we refer to as all these companies stuck in POC purgatory. They have, working models, but really have no idea in terms of how to integrate it with their existing legacy systems, how to integrate it with their back office systems. And that's where all the real value is. That's really where the hard work is, frankly. So having the partnership with the AI Antenna program will hopefully give us access to additional supports for companies who want to test and who want to do evaluations on their AI solutions. So look, I'm sure you don't need me telling you that we're being bombarded or saturated probably with information about AI. And here you are, another webinar listening to more talk about AI. And I mean, last year, certainly for us, was a lot of companies at the very early stages of just trying to get their head around whether, I think companies have realized that they need to be looking at AI. If we look at the traditional software businesses, which is my background, as a software engineer, I mean, that whole industry has been completely changed, significantly. And they're trying to readjust and they're being disrupted. It's been very disruptive. So when we talk to companies, we talk to them about, potentially the three different lenses of use of AI, of adoption AI. One is probably where the majority of companies that we're talking to are focused in is around AI efficiencies. So, helping it with manual processes is the best way to describe it, right? So looking to see whether there's money to be saved, time to be saved, material to be saved, hour to be saved, everything around efficiency and time constraints, right? Or sorry, sort of those types of constraints you have. Then we talk to them about, the growth potential that AI offers through, either creating new products, new services, giving them, embedding AI into their existing products. I think they realize that if they don't, use AI to sort of grow their business, they will definitely be left behind. So, you're seeing a lot of it, AI in the sales and marketing space, which is very interesting, and lots of tools out there to help people sort of grow their business through the use of AI. And then the third one is around differentiation. So, I mean, back to the software engineering scenario, the traditional moats that companies would have built or would have had that would have protected their businesses or their IP have been effectively wiped out on the fact that you can, build a startup using AI tools in a couple of days on your own now versus what it used to take previously to try and start a product or build a product or, using the traditional software methods and software tools that would have just taken months to years. Now there are competitors popping up in all markets, in all forms of niches. that are starting to eat away at other companies' business. So they need to see how AI can be a differentiator in their business or in their product to, to give them that a new moat effectively. So that's they're the perspectives we talk to the companies about. And then we sort of see within that where the best fit is for them in terms of where the best value is, right? Um, so look, the reality is it's been quite messy. There's a lot of data constraints in companies. There's a lot of architectural constraints in companies. There's a lot of organizational realities. And I think that's where the real challenges start to emerge when companies get into it and start to say, how do we integrate this? How do we access our data? Who owns that data? How do we know that data is good, right? So there's lots of really practical things that companies are starting to realize. And the reality is, the hard part isn't embedding it, it's the organizational systems, right? Everybody's using, or lots of people are using the tools like ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, Gemini, Perplexity, etc., right? But what we're seeing is this repeatedly is this gap between, as I mentioned, the experimentation and the operationalization, right? So the team experiments, the pilot looks promising, and then they go to integrate, and it's data quality issues, compliance, ownership, security, running costs, and everything really slows down, right, when it gets to that stage. And that's just a reality of where the real challenges at the integration, at the coalface for companies, right? The tools are giving people the ability to explore and to sort of see the art of the possible, but it's really complex when you get to try and integrate this stuff into even small organizations, because it's the small organizations who are everything's in Google Sheets, or it's in spreadsheets, or it's in some database randomly, right? That's where the data is, or it's in a third-party SaaS solution that they can't get an API so they can't access the data. So these are the sort of things we're really seeing with companies, that there's great excitement and enthusiasm, and there's certainly huge potential. But the reality is there's some real practical things that companies have to overcome to really make it meaningful, right? So one of the top level statements we make people aware that this is nothing. This doesn't obviously replace any of your systems. This is not something that this is something that effectively sits alongside your existing systems, right? So clean data, structured systems, you need a clear flow from event to decision to action, right? So you need to make sure that everything within your factory floor, within your ERP systems, within your reporting systems, are all in fairly good nick, right? And that's where, AI effectively is just picking up various data sources. If the data source, the old adage, if the data source is bad, what's the point? You can't trust the information that you're going to get to it, right? So if your data, I mean, people talk about data readiness as the first step, which is absolutely correct. Not a big bang exercise, but a very piecemeal exercise. You need to look at specific systems that you should start with. And if clearly here, if you don't get these sorts of foundational digital building blocks in place, you're just going to amplify the problems you have versus actually any real value. So we do spend a lot of time with companies understanding what data they already have. There's no shortage of data amongst companies. The problems are around not being able to understand it, too much data in terms of volume, and not knowing how to interpret it. So we ask, we say that, look, a good way to visualize this is that you have your core data layer, and, the best practice would be a unified data store. I think, I'm talking to a few different med tech companies at the moment, and they have a whole digitalization project to basically do their UNS, right? Now, again, you don't do that across all your data, but you would do the data that would be most relevant that you're going to leverage for AI. So we would absolutely recommend a UNS as the strongest structural foundation that you can put in place. Then you're going to have all your other operational layer data coming from your either machine data or from your edge devices. And then we have our third party business systems like your ERPs and your business, your BI Power reporting tools, etc., which then are informed by AI. So AI thrives on well-structured data, ensuring your underlying systems and the plumbing are robust and organized is fundamental to any success. So we would spend quite a considerable amount of time on non-AI work, as in, it's quite um, tedious, frankly. It's an exercise around cleaning and or getting your data ready, but it's absolutely the first step every company needs to take um, when starting out. Um, there's also a little bit just about people's mindsets, back to the point about some executive or somebody on the board is talking about us, the company, needing to do AI. And most organizations, frankly, are probably approaching it backwards. They're saying, where can I use AI versus, questions like where are we leaking value? Where are we really inefficient? So we really take a bottoms up approach, not a top down approach, to find the problems or the inefficiencies in the organization and then start using the tools to help those types of problems. So think of things like the manual reporting I mentioned and spreadsheet reconciliation, quality reviews, right? So that's where AI can be really strong. So what we don't want to do is um, automate or apply AI to a process that's already not optimized, right? So a lot of the time when you're doing this, we would be optimizing business processes in parallel rather than just trying to infuse AI into a current process. Okay, so I should have mentioned at the outset that this isn't a talk about the what is AI. I'm sure people have been attended many of those last year. There's millions of them online. But very quickly, that's the brief foundations in terms of that we give to companies to try and say, okay, how do you now take this and if you have a good digital architecture, how can you get value out of it, right? Um, so when we talk to companies, we ask them sorts of questions like we have here on the slide around, so what processes, waste valuable time? What relies on manual checking or transcription, right? We have lots of organizations who are still copying data from A to B to C to multiple different systems, either for reporting needs or whatever it might be. That's still rampant, right? And it's just a fact of life, but it's very time consuming. Like month end for some companies can be, anything up to 4 days in the finance department doing just manual reconciliation work, right? Um, where do those delays in your processes around event, decision, and action happen, right? Where are your bottlenecks ultimately? And what are the processes that are generating data that no one uses? Why are you doing these things, right? So um, it's really about finding those immediate impacts within your business to say, look, we're doing something really inefficient here, or we're doing something that's way too manual or repetitive. AI loves those things, right? If it's standardized, repetitive, well structured, AI is excellent at managing those types of tasks and activities. So, as I mentioned, we really do take that bottoms up approach to try and get companies to start. So we start with a workshop where companies come in and we normally will bring in one or two people from each department and just sort of almost just do a whiteboard session of just to basically find out all the manual processes, find out all the inefficiencies, just get them all down on paper, especially the ones that are cross-departmental or cross-system or cross-function. And then we help them narrow down using sort of different processes to identify where their starting point is, right? We want to build confidence in the organization, so we ensure that we're starting at a point where it has a good chance of success. It's not too complex. It has relatively low cost in terms of investment, and I'll talk about that in a second. And also that, the company has good data that they can actually use to get them started pretty quickly. So I will talk now a little bit about, I guess, some practical examples, and the examples I'm going to talk through are directly taken from companies that were across our accelerator programs um, last year. So I'm going to look at four. We're going to look at the quality compliance use case. So if you think of this as probably, I mean, it can be in med tech or manufacturing, anything that's where you have quality and compliance requirements across machinery. We'll look at planning and supply chain. Supply chain optimization is an exceptionally key focus for companies. A lot of the med tech companies would be on-demand manufacturing, not necessarily 24/7. So they have to make sure they have very optimized supply chains. Inventory management, in particular, in that example, is something to, factor in with long lead times and stock outages and things like that. Just surprisingly common are outages in organizations. You'd think that, we'd have robust supply chains, but it's actually really common to have stock outages. Then we have an example around automate or operations and production. So that's around anomaly detection, downtime intelligence, and automated reporting. And then the last one is kind of around a back office, which is very popular with the finance people and the admin people. So everything from using AI to monitor, the example we worked on with a few different companies was the sort of quote to price process, right? So particular for things like manufacturing, where it might be bespoke and there's precision engineering involved, it's not just order it from the order book, right? The company needs to send in a bunch of drawings. They come in a whole bunch of different weird file formats, maybe in PDFs. Then the customer might only supply some of the information. There's a big back and forth between the manufacturer and the customer to get the requirements clear. Then the manufacturer has to go off and check what raw materials they need to build it, the price of the raw materials, do they have them in stock, what the lead times are. It's quite a long manual process for a lot of small manufacturing companies like SME, like sort of 20 to 50 size people. Um, so we work with them to basically have using AI to recognize whenever an order comes in. It automatically goes into the email, extracts the relevant measurements and raw material that's needed from the documents that are attached, extracts it, puts it into a central data store so that can all be picked up then and hooked up to the order management system and their inventory system to help them. It doesn't do the full order process, but it takes away all the manual back and forth with the customer to get all the sort of basic information you need to build a quote. So they're now doing that in a couple of hours when it used to take them a couple of days. And in particular, this instance, they were a company who were going into a new industry. So they were traditionally in one industry and they were starting to build or manufacture precision engineering products for another industry like auto space or a space industry, I think it was actually. And so it helped them build up the knowledge in that area as well. Okay, so this first example is a real example. As I mentioned, it's around an automated SPC monitoring process using the Western Electrical rules. So this isn't like generative AI writing your emails, right? This is structured statistical rule automation, right? So these are the problem description here. You'll see where they were doing manual SPC reviews, which effectively was, looking at the problem after it happened for starters, which is a bit too late. But secondly, aside from it being reactive, it was a lot of data, let's say, manipulation to really understand when they had proper drift. You can do basic SPC deviation with just, your tolerance levels. But here, if you want, really to be looking at more informed information around drift to get you sort of a predictive place, um, those charts aren't really going to cut it, right? Doing creating those views yourself aren't really going to give you what you need. What you need is to sort of help scale the monitoring because the operators can only look at so much information. They were trying to build this picture over multiple dashboards, multiple different systems. It just was too cumbersome. So we help them basically automate the monitoring of that data at scale, and the AI bit was the interpretation. So not just warning them when they were about to go out into the red, but in developing reports for them that would give them both historical and future-looking information around what happened last week, what they need to do for the future week. Um, in particular, because a lot of the data points in manufacturing aren't the issues aren't necessarily with the machine data, it's with the operator data, which is a lot more inconsistent in the machine data. So it was fascinating to see the variations in the data based on just the change in shift, who was actually operating the machines. And every operator has their own little sort of nuances in terms of how they do things and how they tweak things to optimize it. They were actually creating a lot of difficulty to actually interpret the information because your standard statistical models weren't picking up those little nuances, right? So this was something that was really valuable to them. Uh, it took away the sort of manual chart review time and effort that they had to create them, right? We wanted them to get to them earlier in terms of their process drift, and ensures consistency then in terms of their interpretation of their SBC as well. So not, as I said, technically, so at the bottom here, you'll see this build complexity. So we use, during the accelerator program, we have sort of a scale from 1 to 10 in terms of everything from, no code, low code tools that you could do to start to do some of this work, right up to what it might, would be considered, custom software development, right? So this was like we had it on a 4 to 6 end of the scale. So you could effectively do this, build this solution with one of the low code tools that you could just subscribe to. And frankly, the only reason it probably was bumping it up into the higher end of the 4 to 6 was the system integration work that's required. So this was something that we did over 8 weeks. So didn't take us very long to do, but now somebody isn't sitting at their machine every morning generating these reports that probably nobody reads, but and trying to do the analysis themselves manually and their interpretation manually. So really beneficial. The second example I have here is from operations and production. So this one was really, I believe, where generative AI is actually genuinely useful, right? This is not for strategy documents. This is really for interpreting structured operational data, right? So with this company, they had really good data, so the data already existed. We didn't have to, the process was pretty tight. There was no real process redesign required. They had AI summarize structured logs. But we still ensured that we had a human in the loop checking and making the decisions, right? So here we're talking about what we would say is augmentation versus automation, right? So here, similar to what I said with the ordering, we had the automatic extraction of the daily production log data. It was generating plain English summaries, so highlighting what those anomalies and those patterns are, and get a consistent reports to the supervisors, but making sure that we had the human in the loop for all the decisions and action. So again, on the sort of side of efficiency. So this was really about getting the reporting time reduced from 45 minutes down to under a minute. So massive savings when you add that over like a week, a year, inside the organization. So a really that was and this one was on the 3 to 4, so it can be done very easily on the low code, no code tools. We use for a lot of these automation solutions, we use a tool called N8N, which is a workflow automation tool. You can, it has like a chat GPT type interface to it, but you can hook it up to your existing backend process or tools and legacy systems and to your, things like if you have Google Sheets or your Gmail, and effectively automate a lot of your processes. So very easy to get up and running with that and started. Um, we did this again over the duration of the 10 weeks, and it was, complexity wise was pretty straightforward. So I mentioned supply chain being a very topical one for lots of companies, and this is, I guess, where AI moves beyond summarization, right? Summarization and is very common and very useful for a lot of companies, and it's a very good place to start. Um, this company they had forecasts in their spreadsheet. Sorry, I can't read, my laptop's too small. And then they had basically loads of manual reconciliation between their ERP system, between Google Sheets, etc., which made their forecasting very difficult, right? And in particular, um, their forecasting systems weren't well connected. As I mentioned, they were trying to do build on demand, but they really did not. They were keeping way too much stock on hand in their warehouse because um, they didn't have good data visibility into how much they really needed or what they needed for the coming quarter or the coming few weeks. So they used to overcompensate. And the driving factor behind them putting in this change actually was because they were expanding the manufacturing side of the house, which was going to be moving into some of their storage capacity. So they were basically forced to optimize and get their tooling better because of the fact that they were keeping way too much stock on hand. This one was a little bit more tricky. We had some, but still a 6 or 7. So it was like we had to use some custom logic. There was some work to integrate it with their ERP system, but 75% reduction in their manual forecast reconciliation time, which was, a huge improvement for the company based on what they had. Again, something that's, not going to change their entire business, but even within their one department, this has been a huge impact for, a relatively small team that they now have access to doing other things, higher value, as they say, as where AI is moving people into do higher value activities. The last example I'll show, and this is not factory floor, this was a one around differentiation, actually, about how a manufacturing company was looking to leverage ESG reporting to try and differentiate themselves in the marketplace. So this is what I would probably call like maybe cross-functional AI. So the company was doing the annual ESG reporting. They had a third-party company who they used to bring in once a year to do the reporting for them because they had access to all the data. It roughly took about 4 months to produce the report, and they were paying like 10K annually to this third party just to do the reporting for them. They did build them like a spreadsheet thing for it, but it was still slow and it was still costly and it was still, retrospective. So we work with them to try and automate that data extraction from their Epicor ERP system. So, and we linked it up with their energy, water, waste trackers so that we could get a monthly ESG dashboard, which was just beyond their sort of check it once a year. So then we were able to calculate their emissions by product or by SKU. So they had it by SKU level information now of their CO2. So then they could provide options to their clients and their customers when they were choosing raw materials to say, if you're looking to, from a sustainability point of view, here's where this raw material sits on the scale versus others, right? So helping customers make more informed decisions about what they're buying, but then also really help the customer in terms of standardizing their internal processes as well in terms of how they were capturing their ESG reporting. So again, this is something they can now run monthly in a couple of hours, gives them great insight. And I guess the main benefit is that the transparency they're now able to provide to their customers and to their tenders when they're providing quotes to their customers. So, you know, here's a situation where you have very similar patterns, but you have manual data collection. You have the pattern of reconciliation across numerous systems and the pattern of delayed insight, right? So here is where we're seeing AI having a huge capability to automate that consolidation and that analysis work. And that's really a recurring theme that we're seeing that a lot of organizations are starting with AI to help them around getting their data ready and then using automation and consolidation with analytics to give them some insights or some information they didn't have before. And that is a perfectly good place to start. So just to, I guess, draw explicitly that to say that, look, none of these came from an AI strategy document. It's not something that is needed in this situation. It came from a workflow bottleneck. And frankly, I think that's the strongest way that you can get buy-in from people within the organization, prove value to upper management, and make people's lives easier if you can remove those workflow bottlenecks. So as I mentioned, the data already exists. It's there. It does need some work to maybe be standardized and put in the right structure. The processes already exist. All companies have quality reviews and reporting and inventory stock systems, right? They're just not optimized particularly well. And a lot of the companies are struggling with interpretation. What is this data actually telling me? Like data is being used majorly for things like root cause analysis in many companies versus the data being used to make proactive, forward-looking decisions. So making it more proactive and then getting rid of all those manual reconciliation and summarization activities and, effectively removing the friction, right? But if you'll notice in all of them as well, they were all really narrow, right? So we're looking to embed in a workflow, make it measurable, and ensuring that we have the human in the loop as well to make sure that this is really about confidence. You want to instill confidence in them to say that this isn't something that they basically will just revert back to their old ways because they won't trust the automated way or the AI way. So we're not talking to them about automated systems, fully automated systems at all. This is really ensuring that we have the right checkpoints along the way to ensure that the human is checking that nothing is incorrect or nothing is wrong effectively. So as I said, this is sort of these are my own sort of checklist in terms of things that we found worked well with companies in terms of what we started with. So we started, as I said, with really specific problems, right? Like things like automate SPC rule detection, not improve quality with AI, right? We spent a lot of time with getting to the use case definition, the problem definition, understanding the way things currently worked. And frankly, even that exercise for a lot of companies was really enlightening because it was in somebody's head or somebody knew part of the process, but not all of it. And that sitting them down and sort of encouraging them to really spend time to say, okay, where is the problem? Where is the actual bottleneck here? Was really helpful in them getting value out of it quickly because then they said, actually, yes, that addresses my specific problem, but we're not trying to do it across the business. So the use cases were really kind of boringly specific, frankly, right? They weren't anything, there's nothing here that was changing the world. Right now, 2026 and next year, companies will be moving on to, I'm sure, bigger problems, but This is certainly from our experience where we've seen the most success with companies in the early stages, right? Um, Also, attach it to something that's already happening. Don't try and create something new, right? So look at those points. Don't make it about the technology. Look at where you have those operational frictions in your business. And that's where, don't necessarily create something new. Tied it to an existing workflow, try and enhance or improve a real existing process. Don't create a parallel process because for obvious reasons that's just going to create more problems, right? So um uh we also are saying users data, use data you already generate, right? So we are working with some companies with synthetic data, all right, just purely from a testing point of view, but we always start out with using a sample set from the company's own data set, because that will give you a real understanding of what kind of condition their data is in. Is it labeled? Is it well structured? What metadata is in there, etc. But also they know their data, right? They know their data so better than you will. So it'll always work much better than synthetic data. And we're saying start small enough that you can prototype in weeks, not in months, right? If it's going to take you 9 months to do something, not only will the technology have moved on, the company moved on, and effectively it won't be of any value. It'll be too late. So we want to make sure that um, companies see value pretty quickly, right? But the golden rule is if you can't define what good looks like at the outcome, what the improvement would be, either doing something faster or with more efficient or less resources, if you can't set what your measurements of success are, then you frankly shouldn't be building it, right? And I think that one rule alone will filter out all your bad pet AI projects that companies start out thinking, hey, this is a good idea. Let's try AI on this. And then they get into it and they realize, yeah, it's a cool toy, but it doesn't actually do anything for us. So it's not helping your situation. And what are the problems? Where are we seeing stall? I mentioned about the POC purgatory. There are a lot of companies are, right? I think a lot of companies are now really overwhelmed with the reality of the work involved in getting their data ready, right? This is why, moving, if you can, in some small way to a UNS system is really going to be worth its weight in gold to you, because we're seeing problems like inconsistent naming conventions. Like that's nothing new. Like that's if you think about it, like even with most companies manufacturing in particular, we know there might be 5 to 10 different names for the one SKU right across, and it's called 5 different things in the systems, right? So reconciling all of that, removing all the duplicates. You're going to have missing data, incomplete data. There's lots of manual overrides in organizations. There's lots of shadow spreadsheets that you've got to filter out, right? There's multiple versions of the truth. Like these things are complex, and they've grown organically over time where companies don't really know even anymore why it's designed the way it is or why it works the way it is, right? So a lot of it is really trying to get your head around the work involved in getting your data ready. But at the same time, we try and not overwhelm companies and say, you can do it in bite-sized chunks ultimately, right? And then what we try and do is we build use cases in such a way that companies can stack them so they can start here and it's not moving on to a different use case. It's stacking your use cases so you're incrementally building value up over time. Integration friction, another real one I mentioned about, getting even access to some ERP systems, even though companies own the data. A lot of third parties will charge companies to get access to the data, and they may not even supply or be willing to supply an API key, for instance. So we can't get, or they've got these manual exports. Sometimes you just can't get around those. There's security and IT things that are going to get in your way where you realize, oh, I can't do this because that's a security issue. And you may be dealing with really, really old systems that just have very limited interoperability. So, um, you know, lots of things there that are going to potentially slow you down, but not necessarily slow you down, things that you need to be thinking about when you're starting out. Other two is the next one is around ownership and trust. So who owns your data? Who owns the output from it? More importantly, who's accountable for the decisions? Can the logic be explained? Uh, Critically important that you can explain it and understand the answer that you're being given. And will people trust it? Because, I guess if you can't explain the logic, you won't be trusting it, right? Um, and the other very tempting thing with the AI projects, because the tooling is so good, and we're seeing a lot of around scope creep, right? So they're working on one aspect of the solution, and then all of a sudden they're having conversations about, while we're at it, or wouldn't it be good to do X, Y, Z? And then your pilot becomes a full-blown sort of transformation project. So we try and keep companies really focused, really well-defined problems, so to get them understand it at a conceptual level and then at a practical level in a simplified way, so they can take those skills and knowledge and build on that and scale it. And I just one slide to wrap up, or one or two to wrap up. I'll share this in the slide, but this is just the detail around the complexity curve that we use in terms of how, because companies don't want to be spending. You can spend a lot of money. You go to EY or any of the consultancy companies; they're doing big business on offering consultancy to companies to do AI projects. Right, it can get expensive really quickly. Um, we try and keep people in the lower end of the scale, the sort of in the 4 to 6 bracket really is where people will get started relatively quickly and they will see value relatively quickly. And then if you want to do like absolutely, we say to customers or clients, a chatbot is not where you start. Absolutely not where you start. Chatbots are really hard to do well. They take a lot of training. I mean, we've all had the crappy chatbot experience online, I'm sure, right? So you don't want to be, it's not something you need. So for instance, where you need a really high level of accuracy, then you need to be thinking about investing more, right? Because accuracy costs time and resources to do it. But this is just something to give you some idea. Um, so we would work on the pilot over sort of a 6 to 8 week time frame. Then we would sort of think about the second phase is then really you're proving it in principle in a sort of standalone environment, narrow scope, but with real data. And then the next phase is around, how do you integrate that with your workflows, with your ERPs, with your MESs, with your QMSs? How do you embed it into your daily routines? What governance and documentation do you need, etc.? And then hopefully where we start to see a lot of companies going later this year will be at the sort of scaling stage where they're rolling it out across functions. They're sort of bringing more of their teams on board, and they're starting to see how they can stack those additional use cases and grow them, as I mentioned. I think, critically, AI absolutely will, I don't think, ever replace the engineering discipline, which hopefully will be good news for everyone in the room. I guess, in my view, it's certainly designed to amplify it. If your systems are structured, measured, and pretty well disciplined, your AI will really strengthen them. If your systems are inconsistent and inconsistent or undefined, AI will really expose them even further. Um, so these, they're not. I think the companies that are seeing the value aren't the ones out there chasing AI because they are being told to. They're really applying that strong discipline to a methodology in terms of how they apply it. Thank you.